Hola a todos! Welcome to Everyday Spanish with Stephanie. Today, we're diving deep into a realistic Spanish conversation that you might hear at a cafe. I'll play both parts of the dialogue, and then I'll break down grammar, vocabulary, cultural nuances, and some colloquialisms. By the end of this video, you'll have a much better understanding of how real Spanish speakers interact in everyday conversations. Are you ready to get started? Let's dive in. Buenas tardes. ¿Tiene mesa para dos? Hola, buenas tardes. Sí, claro. ¿Prefiere en la terraza o dentro? Uf, hace un calor tremendo. Faltaría más. Por aquí, por favor. ¿Les traigo la carta? Sí, gracias. Y una botella de agua, si es tan amable. Enseguida se la traigo. ¿Fría o del tiempo? Fría, por favor, que estamos derritiéndonos. Muy bien, aquí tienen la carta. Les dejo un momento para que decidan. Gracias. Oye, ¿qué me recomiendas? ¿Cuál es la especial de la casa? Pues nuestro chef es experto en la paella. La de mariscos es buenísima. Suena genial. 2 paellas de mariscos, por favor. Excelente elección. ¿Y para beber? Una sangría para compartir, por favor. Perfecto. Ahora mismo les traigo su pedido. All right, now let's break down this conversation piece by piece. Buenas tardes. ¿Tiene una mesa para dos? This is a standard greeting and request for a table. Buenas tardes is used in the afternoon and in the early evening. I want you to notice the use of usted in the word tiene when we're talking to the waiter. It's a very polite way to request a table. Hola, buenas tardes. Sí, claro. ¿Prefiere en la terraza o dentro? The waiter also responds with a greeting and confirms availability. Sí, claro is a much more emphatic yes than just saying sí. Prefiere continues the use of the usted form, showing politeness by both parties. Uf, hace un calor tremendo hoy. Mejor dentro si es posible. Uf is an interjection expressing discomfort. Hace calor means it's hot, and using the word tremendo afterward is just saying it's very, very hot. A tremendous heat. Mejor dentro is a shortened way of saying es mejor sentarnos dentro. And Spanish often does this, omitting words that aren't needed in the context. Faltaría más. Por aquí, por favor. ¿Les traigo la carta? Faltaría más is an idiomatic expression meaning of course, and it's more emphatic than just saying por supuesto. La carta specifically refers to the menu when used in restaurants. Sí, gracias. Y una botella de agua si es tan amable. Si es tan amable is a very polite way to make a request, kind of similar to if you would be so kind. Enseguida se la traigo. Fría o del tiempo. Enseguida means right away, and se la is actually a double pronoun structure referring to la botella de agua. Del tiempo refers to room temperature, so fría o del tiempo, cold or room temperature. Fría, por favor, que estamos derritiéndonos. Que estamos derritiéndonos is a humorous exaggeration, literally meaning we're melting. It's just a colloquial way of expressing how hot it actually is. Let's continue on with the rest of the conversation breakdown. Muy bien, aquí tienen la carta. Les dejo un momento para que decidan. Aquí tienen is a polite way of presenting something to someone. Les dejo un momento is just a courteous way of giving the customers some time to decide. Gracias. Oye, ¿qué me recomiendas? ¿Cuál es la especialidad de la casa? Oye is used to get attention, kind of like the word hey in English. Also, did you notice that we switched from formal usted to informal tú form with the word recomiendas? We're starting to use a more casual tone with the waiter. Pues nuestro chef es experto en paella. La de mariscos es buenísima. Pues is a filler word similar to the word well in English, and buenísima is an emphatic form of the word buena, just meaning really, really good. Suena genial. 2 paellas de mariscos entonces. Suena genial is a casual way of expressing approval. The customer confirmed the order without using a verb. This is actually pretty common in Spanish. Excelente elección. Y para beber, the waiter compliments the choice and asks about drinks in a concise manner. Una sangría para compartir, por favor. Compartir means to share. This specific structure actually shows how Spanish is more likely to use infinitives, where English is more likely to use gerunds. Perfecto. Ahora mismo les traigo su pedido. Ahora mismo emphasizes immediacy, and su pedido refers to the entire order. Okay, now let's discuss some key language points from this conversation. We saw a mix of usted and tú in this conversation. Initially, the customer started talking to the waiter using the usted form, showing more respect. Later, they switched to tú, which is common as conversations become more casual. In spoken Spanish, it's actually quite common to omit subjects and even sometimes verbs when the meaning is clear within the context. That's why we heard mejor dentro instead of es mejor sentarnos dentro. Idiomatic phrases like faltaría más and que estamos derritiéndonos add flavor to a conversation and are key to sounding more native. We also saw a few examples of the subjunctive tense in some of this dialogue. For example, les dejo un momento para que decidan. The subjunctive form of the verb decidir, decidan, is used after the phrase para qué. This is done to express purpose. We also saw some examples of double pronouns. Se la traigo. Se acts as the indirect object pronoun, and it comes before the direct object pronoun la. Now, usually the indirect object pronoun is le, but for phonetic reasons, it doesn't sound as good to say le la traigo, so it's changed to se la traigo. We also saw some examples of augmentatives and diminutives. Buenísima is an augmentative form of buena, which just means really good and used for emphasis. Let's also talk about some cultural insights that we saw within the conversation. In many Spanish-speaking countries, cafes are often social hubs where people might spend hours talking and conversing with one another. Lunch is often the main meal of the day, especially in Spain, and it's usually eaten much later than we're used to in English-speaking countries. Paella is a traditional Spanish dish originating from Valencia, and it's really common to order one of these to share. Sangria is a really popular alcoholic beverage, especially for tourists. Actually, the locals might not drink it as much as the foreigners assume they do. In many Spanish-speaking countries, it's not expected to tip, or if you do, the tip wouldn't be as much. Okay, now let's try practicing some of what we've learned today. Try saying, do you have a table for 4? I'm melting from the heat. What do you recommend? The seafood paella sounds great. A pitcher of sangria to share, please. Okay, now let's go through the correct translations. Do you have a table for 4? The translation is, tiene una mesa para 4. We're going to use the formal usted form tiene here. Para 4 is much more common than saying para 4 personas. We're going to use the usted formal form tiene here. And then also saying para 4 is much more common than saying para 4 personas. I'm melting from the heat. Me estoy derritiendo del calor. This is the literal translation of English I'm melting, which works in Spanish too. Derretirse, which means to melt, is commonly used to express extreme heat. What do you recommend? ¿Qué me recomienda? Or you can also say ¿qué recomiendas? Both forms are correct. The first is just using the more formal usted, while the second is using the more casual tú. Your choice would just largely depend on the situation that you're in. The seafood paella sounds great. The translation? La paella de mariscos suena genial. Suena, which means sound, is commonly used to express that something is appealing, similar to how we use it in English. A pitcher of sangría to share, por favor. Una jarra de sangría para compartir, por favor. Jarra means pitcher, and para compartir means to share. All right, amigos, that's all for today's Real Spanish conversation. Remember, the key to sounding natural is not just knowing the words, but understanding the nuances and cultural contexts. Keep practicing, and don't forget to check out the Unacademy Languages app for more exercises. Hasta la próxima, amigos!